The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a loaded gun. No return address, just my name in precise block letters that seemed to dare me to look inside. I'd found it wedged in our front door when I got home from my shift at First National, and something about its weight made my stomach clench. I'm Hannah, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I understood my life. Funny how paper can weigh so much when it's carrying secrets. My fingers trembled as I spread the photographs across the granite countertop. Greg, my husband, standing in front of Davidson's farm supply with 2 men in expensive suits. Greg again, this time at the copper kettle, leaning in close to the same men. His face animated in that way it gets when he's pitching something to the city council. The timestamp showed Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. He was supposed to be at a budget meeting. The last photo knocked the air from my lungs. Greg shaking hands with Robert Chin, the developer who'd been trying to buy up farmland on the outskirts of town. My father's land. Hey, honey. Something smells amazing. Greg's voice boomed from the foyer, followed by the thud of his briefcase hitting the floor. I swept the photos into a drawer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Just heating up some leftovers, I called back, proud of how steady my voice sounded. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. That same blue tie he'd worn to Dad's last birthday dinner. You wouldn't believe the day I've had. The zoning commission is being impossible about the new development proposal. Which proposal would that be? I kept my eyes on the pasta sauce I was stirring, watching the red bubbles pop and burst like tiny accusations. Oh, you know, the usual stuff. Budget allocations, property assessments. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. His cologne, usually comforting, made me want to gag. Nothing you'd find interesting. I turned in his arms, studied his face. The same face I'd woken up to for 12 years. Dad's oncologist called today. Greg's expression shifted, concern replacing his easy smile. How's he doing? The treatment's not working as well as they hoped. They want to try something more aggressive. I watched his eyes, searching for any flicker of calculation. It's expensive. We'll figure something out, he said, but his arms had loosened their hold. Your dad's tough. He'll pull through. The phone rang, saving me from having to respond. Greg answered it in his study, his voice a low murmur through the wall. I pulled the photos back out, staring at the evidence of his betrayal until my vision blurred. My sister Megan's words from last week echoed in my head, something's off with Greg lately. The way he changed the subject when I mentioned Dad's farm. I defended him then. Told her she was imagining things, that Greg would never do anything to hurt our family. Now, holding proof of his lies in my trembling hands, I wondered what else I'd been blind to. The study door opened, and I shoved the photos away again. Greg emerged, his face carefully neutral. That was Robert Chin, he said, watching me. He wants to meet tomorrow to discuss some community development initiatives. Robert Chin, I repeated, tasting bile. The developer. You've heard of him. Here and there. I turned back to the stove, killing the heat under the sauce that had started to burn. Will you be meeting him at the copper kettle again? The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. When I looked back, Greg's smile had hardened into something I didn't recognize. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough. I gripped the counter's edge, anchoring myself. Tell me you're not trying to sell my father's land while he's fighting for his life. Greg's laugh was hollow. It's complicated, Hannah. There are things you don't understand. Then help me understand, I said, but I already knew. The careful man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who could look me in the eye and plot against my family. Sometimes, he said, reaching for me, we have to make hard choices for the greater good. I stepped back, out of his reach. The distance between us felt like miles, and I knew with sudden clarity that it would only grow wider. Dad's oxygen tank wheezed in the guest room as I helped him unpack. His hands shook while folding his flannel shirts, but his eyes were sharp as ever when they met mine. "You didn't have to do this, honey. I can manage at the farm." The lie sat between us like a third person in the room. We both knew he couldn't manage alone anymore, not with the cancer eating away at his strength. I tucked his medications into the bedside drawer, arranging them by schedule. "The doctor said you need someone nearby. Besides, Greg and I want you here." Another lie. Greg had barely concealed his irritation when I'd announced Dad was moving in. But he couldn't exactly refuse without looking like the villain he was becoming. "Speaking of Greg," Dad said, lowering himself onto the bed, "he seems different lately. Distracted." I busied myself with hanging his coat in the closet. "He's got a lot on his plate with work." Hannah. Just my name, but loaded with meaning. Dad had always been able to see through my deflections. "What's really going on?" The doorbell saved me from answering. Megan's voice carried up the stairs, followed by Eli's excited chatter. I squeezed Dad's shoulder. "That'll be dinner. You ready to head down?" Greg was already playing host in the dining room, pouring wine and laying on the charm. "Sam, great to see you settled in," he said, helping Dad into his chair. "We'll have you feeling better in no time." Eli bounced around the table, showing off his new soccer medal. "Aunt Hannah, did you see? I scored the winning goal." "That's amazing, buddy." I ruffled his hair, grateful for his innocent enthusiasm. "Maybe you can teach your Uncle Greg some moves. He could use the exercise." Greg's laugh was pitch perfect, but his eyes flashed a warning. "Always keeping me humble, aren't you, dear?" Megan caught the undertone, her gaze darting between us. "The food smells wonderful, Hannah. Need help bringing anything out?" In the kitchen, she cornered me by the oven. "Okay, spill. What's with the Arctic chill between you two?" I pulled out the casserole, buying time. "Did you know Robert Chen's been sniffing around Dad's property again?" "The developer? I thought Dad told him to take a hike months ago." "He did." I lowered my voice. "But apparently, Greg's been meeting with him behind our backs." Megan's sharp intake of breath matched the sick feeling in my gut. "Are you sure?" "I have photos." The casserole dish clattered against the counter harder than intended. And when I confronted him, he fed me some line about the greater good. "That snake." Megan's face flushed with anger. "Does Dad know?" "Not yet. He's got enough to deal with." Back at the table, Greg was in full politician mode, regaling everyone with stories from City Hall. The development committee's really excited about some upcoming projects. Could bring a lot of jobs to the area. "What kind of projects?" Dad asked, pushing his food around his plate. "Oh, various things. Retail spaces, maybe some mixed-use developments." Greg's smile never wavered. "Actually, Sam, I'd love to get your thoughts on some proposals. Your experience with land management could be invaluable." I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles went white. The audacity of him, trying to manipulate Dad while he was vulnerable. "Uncle Greg," Eli piped up, "is it true you're gonna build stores where Grandpa's farm is?" The silence that followed was deafening. Greg's facade cracked for just a moment before he recovered. "Where'd you hear that, sport?" "Tommy at school said his dad works for some guy named Shin, and they're gonna build a mall or something." Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "Is that true, Greg?" "It's just preliminary discussions," Greg said smoothly. "Nothing's decided." "But Sam, you have to think about the future. Medical bills aren't getting any cheaper, and the farm's just sitting there. just sitting there. Dad's voice was quiet but steel-edged. That land's been in our family for 3 generations. My father's buried there. And we respect that, Greg said, reaching for his wine glass. But sometimes progress requires difficult choices. I stood up so abruptly my chair scraped against the floor. Progress? Is that what you call going behind our backs to sell out family? Mommy, Eli whispered, why is everyone mad? Megan pulled him close. Come on, sweetie. Let's go get dessert ready. As they left, Dad pushed himself up from the table, his breathing labored. I think I need to lie down. I moved to help him, but Greg got there first. Let me assist you, Sam. Don't touch me. Dad's words cut through the room like a blade. I may be dying, Greg, but I'm not dead yet. And that land isn't yours to sell. The bank statement spread across my desk told a story I wasn't prepared for. Greg's separate account, the one he thought I didn't know about, was hemorrhaging money. Large withdrawals, suspicious transfers, and a pattern of deposits from shell companies I'd never heard of. Working at First National had its advantages. Like knowing which tellers would look the other way when you accessed your husband's private records. My phone buzzed. Megan. You need to get to the hospital. Now. The drive was a blur of red lights and horn blasts. I found Dad in the emergency room, oxygen mask clouding with each labored breath. Megan paced nearby, her face drawn. What happened? Collapsed during his morning walk. Greg was supposed to be watching him. Her voice cracked. He said he had an emergency meeting. The same excuse he'd used yesterday, and the day before. I touched Dad's hand, his skin paper thin under my fingers. Where is Greg now? That's the thing. Megan lowered her voice. I drove by the copper kettle on my way here. His car was in the lot. With Chen's. Something snapped inside me. Stay with Dad. The restaurant was half empty when I walked in. Greg sat in a corner booth with Chen and 2 other men, papers spread between them. Their heads bent together like conspirators, which I suppose they were. Greg saw me first. The color drained from his face. Hannah. What are you? Dad's in the hospital. My voice carried across the quiet restaurant. But don't let that interrupt your meeting. Chen gathered the papers quickly, stuffing them into his briefcase. Mrs. Mitchell, we were just discussing the greater good. The words tasted like poison. Planning how to carve up my family's legacy while my father fights for his life. Greg stood, reaching for my arm. Let's discuss this at home. I jerked away. I saw your accounts, Greg. The withdrawals, the shell companies. What have you done? The other diners were staring now. Greg's political smile slipped into something uglier. You had no right to look at my private accounts. You had no right to sell my father's land behind our backs. I pulled out my phone, showed him the screen. But that's not all you've been hiding, is it? Want to explain these transfers to offshore accounts? Chen and his associates were already heading for the door. Greg's facade cracked completely. You don't understand. The campaign funds. There were expectations. Promises I had to keep. Campaign funds. The pieces clicked together. You've been embezzling money. Keep your voice down, he hissed. I can fix this. The development deal with Chin would cover everything. No one would ever know. Except my father would lose everything he's worked for. Your father is dying, Hannah. His words hit like physical blows. That land is worth nothing as a farm, but developed. It could save us all. Pay for his treatments, secure our future. Our future. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. There is no "our" anymore, Greg. You killed at the moment you decided to sacrifice my family to cover up your crimes. His expression shifted, something desperate creeping in. Think about what you're doing. If this gets out, I'll lose everything. My career, my freedom. Like I'm losing my father while you play deals with developers? I pulled out another phone, his backup that he thought I didn't know about, and held it up. Everything's here, isn't it? All your messages with Chen, the financial records, the bribes. Greg lunged for the phone. I stepped back, watching his careful mask shatter completely. You want revenge? He snarled. Fine. But remember, if I go down, you'll have nothing. No money for your father's treatments, no house, no future. Is that what you want? The restaurant had emptied around us, leaving only the weight of his threat hanging in the air. I thought of Dad in that hospital bed, of the family farm where we'd scattered Mom's ashes, of all the promises Greg had made and broken. What I want, I said quietly, is for you to feel exactly what my father feels right now. To watch everything you love slip away while you're powerless to stop it. I turned and walked out, Greg's pleas following me into the parking lot. My phone buzzed, Megan again. But for the first time since this nightmare began, my hands weren't shaking. I knew exactly what I had to do. The hospital bills arrived on the same morning Dad's latest test results came back. I spread them across my sister's kitchen table, the numbers blurring together like abstract art. Each page represented another piece of my father's life we were trying to buy back. We could sell the truck, Megan suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. We both knew it wouldn't be enough. Eli wandered in, still in his pajamas despite the late morning. Is Grandpa coming home soon? Come here, buddy. I pulled him close, breathing in the simple comfort of his presence. Grandpa needs to stay at the hospital a little longer. The doctors are helping him get stronger. Like Superman. His eyes brightened with hope. Something like that. The lie tasted bitter, but I forced a smile. Megan's phone buzzed. Her expression darkened as she read the message. Greg's calling an emergency city council meeting. Today. My stomach clenched. About what? The development proposal. He's pushing for a vote on rezoning Dad's land. The room tilted sideways. Greg knew Dad was too weak to attend, knew I'd be tied up at the hospital. He was making his move while we were vulnerable. I have to stop him. I stood up, gathering my things. Hannah, wait. Megan grabbed my arm. There's more. I heard from Sarah at the bank. Greg's been asking about taking out a second mortgage on your house. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. That house was my inheritance from Mom, the only thing I'd brought into our marriage that was truly mine. He can't, I whispered. Not without my signature. Megan's silence said everything. Aunt Hannah. Eli's voice was small. Are you and Uncle Greg getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke. Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from Greg, we need to talk. Meet me at the house. I found him in his home office, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. He looked older somehow, haunted. The council meeting, I said. Call it off. I can't. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The developers have a timeline. If we don't move now, they'll what? Find another piece of land to destroy. Another family to tear apart. Is that what you think I'm doing? He finally looked up. Everything I've done has been for us. For your father. Don't you dare. My voice shook. Don't use Dad as an excuse for your crimes. Then what's your solution? He stood, anger breaking through his politician's mask. How are we supposed to pay for his treatments? The experimental drugs he needs aren't covered by insurance. The farm barely breaks even. So you forge my signature. Try to steal my house. He flinched. You weren't supposed to know about that. Like I wasn't supposed to know about the embezzlement. The bribes. I did what I had to do. His voice dropped to a whisper. And now you have a choice to make. He slid a document across the desk. A contract, already filled out with Dad's name. Sign it, Greg said. Let Chen develop the land. The money would cover all of your father's treatments, with enough left over to set him up comfortably for whatever time he has left. My hand hovered over the paper. One signature and Dad could have the best care money could buy. One betrayal to prevent another. And if I don't? Greg's expression hardened. Then I'll have no choice but to protect myself. Those financial records you found. They could implicate you too. A bank teller accessing private accounts, stealing confidential information. The threat hung between us like a blade. You'd destroy me to save yourself. I'd do whatever it takes to survive. His smile was a ghost of the one I'd fallen in love with. Just like you're doing now. I picked up the pen, felt its weight in my hand. Thought of Dad in his hospital bed, of Eli's innocent questions, of Mom's house that had sheltered generations of our family. The pen snapped in my grip, ink staining my fingers like blood. You're right about one thing, I said, turning toward the door. I will do whatever it takes. But not to survive. To make you pay. His laughter followed me out, tinged with desperation. You've got nothing, Hannah. No proof that would stand up in court. I touched the recorder in my pocket, still running. We'll see about that. The small rental house smelled of dust and forgotten summers. I helped Dad settle into the worn armchair while Megan brought in the last of his medical equipment. His oxygen tank wheezed in rhythm with the ancient ceiling fan. You shouldn't have to do this, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. Moving out of your own home. It's not my home anymore. I arranged his medications on the kitchen counter, organizing them by time and dosage. Not since Greg tried to steal it. My phone buzzed again, the 15th call from Greg today. I silenced it without looking. There's something you need to see. Dad pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, hands trembling. Found it while packing. Inside was a letter, Mom's handwriting flowing across the yellowed paper. The date showed 2 weeks before she died. I never gave it to you, Dad said. Maybe I should have. The words blurred as I read, My dearest Hannah, I know you'll face choices that tear at your heart. Remember that revenge is a poison that kills the soul before it reaches its target. Your strength isn't in your ability to hurt others, but in your capacity to protect what matters most. A knock at the door interrupted. Through the window, I saw Greg's car parked across the street. Don't answer it, Megan said, but I was already moving. Greg stood on the porch, his politician's smile cracking at the edges. You're making a mistake, Hannah. The council voted. The development is happening whether you like it or not. Get off my property. Your property. He laughed, but there was something desperate in it. You can't afford this place without me. How long before Dad's medical bills eat through your savings? A month? 2. I recorded everything, Greg. The threats, the admission about the embezzlement. Inadmissible. His smile widened. Recorded without consent. Besides, who do you think they'll believe? The respected councilman or the unstable wife who accessed private bank records illegally? Behind me, Dad's coughing echoed through the house. Greg's eyes flickered toward the sound. He doesn't have much time left, Greg said softly. Let me help. One signature and all this goes away. Dad gets the best care money can buy. Like you helped Mom. The words escaped before I could stop them. Greg stepped back as if struck. What are you talking about? The experimental treatment she wanted. My voice shook. The one you said we couldn't afford. But you had money then too, didn't you? Hidden away for your precious political career. That's not. I found the accounts, Greg. The dates match. You let her die to protect your ambitions. The mask slipped completely. Everything I did was for us. For our future. There is no us anymore. I pulled Mom's letter from my pocket. Only the truth. And tomorrow, everyone's going to know it. What truth? His eyes narrowed. Check your email. I sent copies of everything to every news outlet in the state. Bank records, recordings, proof of the bribes, everything. The color drained from his face. You'll destroy yourself too. Maybe. I thought of Mom's words about poison and protection. But sometimes the price is worth paying. He reached for me, but Megan appeared in the doorway. Leave, Greg. Before I call the police. As he turned to go, Dad's voice carried from inside. Greg. We all froze. Dad stood in the hallway, leaning heavily on his walker. I wanted to tell you something. Dad's eyes were cleared despite his labored breathing. The land isn't just dirt and trees. It's where Sarah and I built our life. Where we scattered her ashes. You tried to sell not just property, but memories. Family. Love. He straightened slightly. That's why you were never worthy of my daughter. Greg's facade crumbled completely. Without another word, he walked to his car and drove away. Inside, I found a second page to Mom's letter, one I hadn't noticed before. The last lines caught in my throat. Whatever you choose, remember this, true strength lies not in standing alone, but in standing together. Your father and sister will need you, just as you'll need them. Let love guide your choices, not hate. It's the only way to keep your soul intact while fighting for what's right. I looked at Dad and Megan, both watching me with concern and love. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight, in this dusty little house, I was exactly where I needed to be. The news vans circled our rental house like vultures. Through the window, I watched reporters clutching microphones in the rain, their faces hungry for scandal. Dad's medical equipment hummed in the background, marking time like a metronome. My phone lit up with another text from Megan, turn on channel 4. Now. Greg stood at a podium outside City Hall, his face drawn but composed. Behind him, Robert Chin smiled like a satisfied cat. My wife's accusations are unfortunate, Greg said, his voice steady. But they stem from a place of deep personal pain. Her father's illness, combined with her recent emotional instability. The remote cracked in my grip. Furthermore, he continued. The alleged financial improprieties were actually attempts to secure additional funding for local healthcare initiatives, including cancer treatment programs. Everything I've done has been for this community. The camera panned to show supporters holding signs, "We stand with Greg" and "Progress over persecution." My phone buzzed again, the bank this time. My accounts were frozen pending investigation. Greg's preemptive strike had worked perfectly. Hannah. Dad's voice was weaker today. Someone's at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah Chin, Robert's wife. She clutched an envelope, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I know what they did, she said when I opened the door. To your mother. To others. The envelope contained medical records. Names, dates, treatments denied while money disappeared into offshore accounts. My mother's name jumped out from the list, along with dozens of others. Robert's been working with Greg for years, Sarah whispered. Using medical funding for their developments. I wanted to come forward before, but... She touched her wedding ring. I was a coward. A commotion erupted outside. Greg's car pulled up, surrounded by reporters. He stepped out, straightening his tie, that familiar political smile in place. I've come to speak with my wife, he announced to the cameras. To help her understand the truth. Sarah slipped away as Greg approached. He looked smaller somehow, despite his confident stride. You're making this worse for yourself, he said when I opened the door. The bank records. Inadmissible. The recordings. Illegal. But this vendetta against me. That's slander. I know about Mom's treatment, I said. About all of them. His smile flickered. What are you talking about? I held up Sarah's envelope. The medical records. The diverted funds. Everything. For the first time, real fear crossed his face. Where did you get those? Does it matter? It's over, Greg. All of it. He stepped closer, voice dropping. Think about what you're doing. One phone call and I can make sure your father gets into that experimental treatment program. The one that could actually save him. The temptation hit like a physical blow. Behind me, Dad's oxygen tank wheezed. You're still trying to manipulate me, I said. Even now. I'm trying to save you from yourself. His eyes softened. Remember when we first met? You said you loved how I could always find a solution. Let me find one now. For a moment, I saw him as he used to be, the man who brought me coffee in bed, who held my hand at Mom's funeral, who promised to protect our family. Then Dad started coughing, the sound wet and painful, and the illusion shattered. The only solution, I said, is the truth. The truth. He laughed bitterly. The truth is, you'll lose everything. Your job, your reputation, maybe even your freedom. And for what? Revenge? Justice? There's no difference. He reached for the envelope. Not in the real world. I stepped back into the house. Maybe that's why you never understood me. Last chance, Hannah. His voice hardened. Don't make me destroy you. Through the window, I could see the reporters watching, cameras ready. Beyond them, storm clouds gathered over the distant farmland, Mom's final resting place, Dad's legacy, our family's heart. You already tried, I said, and closed the door on his face, on our marriage, on any last hope of an easy resolution. Inside, Dad's breathing had grown more labored. The medical records felt heavy in my hands, weighted with choices and consequences I couldn't yet see. Tomorrow would bring either justice or ruin. Tonight, watching Greg retreat to his car through the rain-streaked window, I wasn't sure I could tell the difference anymore. The state attorney's office smelled of leather and power. I sat across from Greg and his lawyer, Sarah Chen's documents spread between us like a minefield. Outside, reporters pressed against the windows, their cameras flashing like lightning. These records were obtained illegally, Greg's lawyer said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ask Sarah Chen about that. I met Greg's eyes. Your partner's wife has quite a conscience. Greg's carefully constructed facade cracked. Robert's wife. She gave you these. She's not the only one tired of watching people die while you play politics. The attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, given the circumstances, we're prepared to offer a deal. Your husband will support your father's medical treatment, fully funded, in exchange for no deals. I pushed a USB drive across the table. This contains everything. The diverted medical funds, the offshore accounts, the bribes. I'm not here to negotiate. Greg leaned forward. Think about what you're doing. If this goes public, everyone loses. The development project dies. The medical center closes. Is that what you want? I want the truth. The truth. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. The truth is I was trying to save us all. The town's dying, Hannah. The medical center's bleeding money. The development project would have funded everything, new treatments, research programs, jobs. By stealing from dying patients. From my mother. His face softened. Your mother. That was different. I made a mistake. I was young, scared of failing. The campaign needed money. She needed treatment. My voice cracked. She begged you to help her try the experimental program. I know. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. That's why I've been working so hard to make it right. The new medical center would have state-of-the-art facilities. No one would ever have to leave town for treatment again. The door opened. Megan stepped in, followed by a man in an FBI jacket. Greg's lawyer stood. This meeting is over. Actually, the FBI agent said, it's just beginning. Mrs. Chen has been very cooperative. Greg's composure shattered. Sarah's working with the FBI. Along with 3 members of the development committee. The agent placed a warrant on the table. They've provided quite a paper trail. You don't understand, Greg pleaded, looking at me. Everything I did was for us. For this town. For your father. My father taught me that integrity isn't negotiable. I stood, legs shaking. You could have come clean years ago. Could have told me the truth about Mom. Instead, you built lies upon lies until you couldn't tell the difference anymore. And you're so pure. His voice hardened. Using illegal recordings. Stealing bank records. You became exactly what you hated. The truth of his words stung, but I thought of Mom's letter. About poison and protection. Maybe you're right. I pulled out one final document. That's why I'm resigning from the bank. Turning myself in for accessing those records. The difference is, I'm choosing the truth. You're still running from it. Greg stared at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. You'd sacrifice everything. Your career. Your freedom. Some things are worth the price. The FBI agent stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, we need you to come with us. As they led him away, Greg stopped at the door. I did love you, Hannah. Maybe not enough to change, but I did. I know. The admission hurt more than I expected. That's what makes it tragic. Through the window, I watched them escort him to a waiting car. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Tomorrow's headlines would destroy the man I'd once loved, the life we'd built, the future we'd planned. Megan touched my arm. You okay? No. I thought of Dad waiting at home, of Mom's grave on the farmland. Of all the families who'd lost loved ones while Greg played God with their lives. But I will be. The medical center. The FBI agent says they'll freeze the development plans, investigate everything. Maybe something good can still come from this mess. Outside, storm clouds finally broke, rain washing away the last traces of the life I'd thought I knew. It felt, somehow, like cleansing. Spring wildflowers dotted the farmland, pushing through soil that had witnessed generations of my family's story. I stood at Mom's favorite spot, watching Eli plant sunflower seeds along the fence line. These'll grow taller than me, he said, patting the earth with careful hands. Just like the ones your grandma used to plant. I touched the weathered fence post, remembering Mom's garden parties. The way she'd made this land feel alive with possibility. The sound of tires on gravel announced Megan's arrival. She carried a stack of papers, her expression cautiously hopeful. The board approved it. The land trust paperwork just needs your signature. The documents outlined our vision, a community wellness center built around the existing farmland. Gardens where patients could heal, spaces for experimental treatments, rooms where families could stay close to their loved ones during treatment. Everything Greg had promised, but built on truth instead of lies. "Have you read the letter?" Megan asked quietly. I touched the envelope in my pocket, Greg's final communication before starting his sentence. I'd carried it for days, unsure whether to open it. Not yet. Maybe it's time. Dad's wheelchair creaked as he joined us, his breathing stronger since starting the new treatment program. The FBI's investigation had uncovered funds that were redistributed to the victims of Greg's schemes. A small justice, but meaningful. "Your mother would be proud," Dad said, watching Eli work. "Not of the revenge, maybe. But of what you're building from it." I unfolded Greg's letter, his familiar handwriting somehow both strange and intimate. "Hannah. I finally understand what you meant about truth being worth the price. In here, I've had time to count the cost of my choices. Not just in years served, but in trust destroyed and lives damaged. I was so focused on building a legacy that I forgot what really matters. I've arranged for my remaining assets to be transferred to the Wellness Center project. Anonymously, through a trust. Not for redemption, I know that's not possible, but because it's right. Because somewhere between ambition and fear, I lost sight of why I wanted to help people in the first place. You were stronger than me. You chose truth over safety, justice over comfort. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you deserved. Greg." A breeze stirred the wildflowers, carrying the scent of fresh earth and new growth. Eli ran over, hands dirty from planting. "Look what I found." He held up a small metal box, rusted but intact. Inside was Mom's old garden journal, its pages filled with her dreams for the land. She wanted to build something here too, Dad said, touching the weathered cover. "A place of healing. We will." I tucked Greg's letter away, letting it become part of the past. "But we'll do it right." The sound of construction equipment echoed from the far field where the Wellness Center's foundation was being laid. Sarah Chen had joined the project's board, turning her husband's testimony into something positive. Sometimes redemption comes from unexpected places. "And Hannah." Eli pointed to the horizon where storm clouds gathered. "Should we plant more seeds before the rain?" I looked at my family, Dad in his wheelchair but fighting, Megan with her quiet strength. Eli with his innocent wisdom, and felt something settle in my heart. The desire for revenge had brought me here, but love would build what came next. "Yes," I said, taking his small hand in mine. "Let's plant something new." The first drops of rain began to fall, not washing away the past but nourishing the future. I thought of Mom's letter about poison and protection, about Greg's final attempt at redemption, about all the ways justice and mercy tangle together. The land would tell a new story now. Not just of what was lost or taken, but of what could grow from broken ground. Sometimes the hardest truth is that healing doesn't look like we expect it to. Thunder rolled across the fields as we worked, planting seeds in the gathering storm. Each one a promise, a possibility, a choice to build rather than destroy. That's the thing about revenge, it shows you what you're willing to sacrifice. But love shows you what you're willing to build from the ashes it leaves behind.